short lecture because we're just going over the overview of the presidency. Now, this may come as a shock to some of you, but I, your teacher, officially qualify to be President of the United States. I am a natural-born citizen. I am at least 35 years of age, and I have lived consecutively for the last 14 years in the United States of America. The official qualifications are not that hard. There's nothing about education, nothing about occupation, nothing about political philosophy. You have to be a natural-born citizen. Oh, just for clarification here, if you were born through C-section, you are still eligible to be President of the United States. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. You have to be at least 35 years of age, and you have to have been a resident for the last 14 years. Now, if you are elected to the presidency, you will have a 4-year term. Originally, you could have had as many 4-year terms as the people were willing to give you. However, George Washington, after his second term, kind of set a precedent, and he walked away after his second term as president. Today, you are limited to 2 terms. After FDR won his 4th term as president, the House and Senate were controlled by the Republican Party, and they thought, you know what, 4 terms is like being a king. We need to put a change to that, and they proposed the 22nd Amendment. The 22nd Amendment limits a president to 2 terms, 22nd, 2 terms. Now, under this amendment, you can actually serve a maximum of 10 years. If you are the vice president and the president dies, resigns, or is impeached and removed from office and has served at least 2 years of his term, you can finish off the term, run for election, run for re-election. However, if the president has served less than 2 years of his term, you are only allowed to finish the 1 term and run 1 time. You have to have the full second term, all 4 years available, to be able to run a second time. So as you can see, Lyndon Johnson took over for JFK in 1963 and was therefore eligible to be elected twice. JFK had served 1,036 days or 2.8 years as president. So Johnson finished his term, ran for election, and if he had chosen to, could have run for re-election in 1968. Gerald Ford, on the other hand, who took over for Nixon in '74, could only be elected 1 time. Nixon had only served 528 days, or 1.4 years, of his second term. So Ford finished that term and could have won 1 additional term. He ran and lost in '76. Now, compensation. The compensation is set by the Congress. It cannot be raised or lowered during the president's term of office, which makes sense. We didn't want Congress holding him blackmail. The salary was raised to $2,000. I'm sorry, from $2,000 to $2,000. Did you just hear that? 2,000. Sorry, from $200,000 to $400,000 in 2001. One of the things I've said about this is I've always wondered why that happened, and I think it has to do with another lesson we did where we spoke about COLAs, cost of living adjustments, and how Congress gets automatic COLAs. And when they raised that from 200 to 400,000, and the president, by the way, is the only person who had that raise, the average member of Congress was making about 170,000. The leadership was making about 180,000. At some point, members of Congress are going to make over $200,000 a year due to annual COLAs. The leadership, the Speaker of the House, already does. I doubt sincerely that if the Speaker of the House was going to make more than the President, people would have said, hey, that's not right, raise the President's salary. More than likely, the people would have said, hey, why is a member of Congress making more than the President? Cut Congress's salary. So, rather than have it be an issue, the members of Congress voted to double the president's salary from $200,000 to $400,000. Now, I do want to stress, I have no proof for that. That is literally a hypothesis by me. Now, other perks. It's kind of cool to be president because you have some other things that you get. For example, there we go. You live in the White House, and most people will know your address, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. You have a domestic staff that includes chefs, butlers, maids, gardeners, personal tailors. The chefs are kind of cool. It's kind of weird in the U.S. A lot of the White House chefs have been classically trained French chefs, which I always thought was kind of bizarre that we would feed people French food when they came to the U.S. at a White House. I thought it was strange. Uh, when George W. Bush was president, he came from Texas. And he actually had a chef who did a lot of barbecue, which I think makes a lot more sense as classic American food. President Obama has more of an Asian taste, and he has had a lot of stuff that was influenced by his upbringing in Hawaii and Asian cuisine in general. Uh, if you are at the White House, you also have, as you see, a swimming pool and tennis courts. There is a bowling alley down in the basement, which I think is kind of cool. There's a private movie theater. If you're the president, you're not basically going to be able to go to your local movie theater. When Bill Clinton was president, the movie Castaway had come out with Tom Hanks, and Bill Clinton wanted to see it. Now, when you're the president, you can pull some strings. So the president had his press secretary, probably, or his chief of staff, somebody, call the movie studio that had released Castaway and said, "We'd like you to send a copy of Castaway. Oh, and would you invite Tom Hanks over for dinner also? We'd like to see the movie with him." And Tom Hanks was literally on vacation. And if you know the movie Castaway, he was basically stranded on an island and looked like a bum. Well, he had kept that look and was literally vacationing. And there were these great photos of Tom Hanks getting the call that he needed to go, that he was invited. He didn't have to go, but he did choose to go see the movie with the president and have dinner. Getting on a plane looking like a complete derelict, like long hair, shorts, denim, and, flip flops. And then when he gets off the plane, it was like Tom Hanks, the makeover, and he's in a tuxedo, perfectly groomed on his way to the White House. Uh, when you are president, you also get to use a private 747 jet, Air Force One. As I'm doing this lecture right now, it is December 27th. A couple of years ago, President Obama, and he always does this, he goes to Hawaii for the Christmas break. And about 5 years ago, right around this time of year, I looked up at the sky. I just was outside, and all of a sudden, I saw like six fighter planes and a big 747 flying overhead. And I realized I had just seen Air Force One because the president was on his way back from Hawaii going to Washington, D.C. And if you ever see Air Force One in the air, you'll know it's Air Force One because it's going to have fighter jets on both sides of it. It's kind of cool. Um, what else do you get? You get to use Camp David, which is a mountain retreat, and it's also a place where you can bring people for private conversations. Press doesn't go to Camp David. So in the upcoming Congress, you're going to have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Democratic president. If they really want to get something done, don't be surprised if the leadership of the House and Senate, along with the president, go on a retreat to Camp David. The president does get medical and dental coverage. Yeah, it's probably a good thing. And he gets Secret Service protection. The Secret Service protection is an interesting one because basically if you decide to be president or run for president, you give up privacy. The Secret Service are always there. Congress was going to end the amount of time that a president would have Secret Service protection after being president. It was supposed to end 10 years after they left office, but they decided to change that. And today, presidents, ex-presidents, have Secret Service protection for the rest of their lives. It never goes away. So just an interesting piece for you there. All right, going back. Well, almost set that right. Come on, straighten it out. There we go. Now, excuse me, after you are done being president, you're going to have a chance to make real money. President Obama will probably be, well, he's already pretty rich from the books he's written. He's going to be really rich. You get speaking fees. You're going to be able to go places and you will have an opportunity to give a speech. My favorite example of this is actually Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was president from 1981 up to 1989. During that time, Ronald Reagan made $200,000 a year, or $1.6 million in his 8 years as president. After he left office, Ronald Reagan went to Japan and he gave two 20-minute speeches after leaving the White House, and he received $2 million for those two 20-minute speeches. So here's the president who made 1.6 million over 8 years as leader of the free world, and he gets $2 million in just a few minutes after that. I think that's pretty amazing. You're going to be able to write your memoirs. Bill Clinton had a book. He called it My Life. And sorry about this with the way these are showing up. But basically, My Life, Clinton was able to get a $10 to $12 million advance before he wrote the first words on the first page. And then he would get royalties afterwards. You can also serve on the board of directors of different corporations. And this may not sound like a big deal to you, but you're going to make some significant money doing this. Gerald Ford did this. I had some examples. Ford got a high-paying board membership at 20th Century Fox, Primerica, and American Express. You also are going to have those other ones in here. But here's the deal. Basically, the reason that you're going to do this is you have connections to people all over the world. So if you're an international corporation, you would like an ex-president to be on your board of directors because they know the leaders and the movers and shakers of companies around the world. So it can be very beneficial for you. Now, our last part for the lesson today is a serious part, and this is the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment is kind of a safeguard for us. It's got two parts. One was really kind of a reaction to what happened to Woodrow Wilson when he was president. If you remember, Woodrow Wilson was campaigning hard for a ratification of the Treaty of Versailles and suffered a stroke and really was incapacitated but alive. And we did not have a way to transfer power if the president was incapacitated but alive. If he died, we knew what to do. But what happens if you live and we don't know what to do? So that was part of the reaction here. The other part, as you're going to see, is about death, resignation, or impeachment. So let's take a look here. Part one. If the presidency is vacant due to death, resignation, or impeachment and removal, the VP becomes president. He in turn nominates and Congress confirms a new vice president. He can pick anyone he wants. When Nixon was president, his vice president, Spiro Agnew, was forced to resign. Nixon chose Gerald Ford to be his new vice president. When Ford became president after Nixon resigned, he chose Nelson Rockefeller to be his new vice president. So if the VP dies before his inauguration as president, something happens. So like basically the president dies, and before we can even swear in the new vice president, he dies, then we have a line of succession, and you can see it's the Speaker, Senate President pro tempore, Secretary of State, Treasury, Defense, and then all of the other cabinet positions in order of their creation. So the last person on the list, or the last position on the list, would be the Director of Homeland Security. It's part two of this that I think is the real important one and was kind of a thoughtful piece for an amendment. If the president is disabled and unable to carry out his duties, so there's two parts. One, and this happens more than you may recognize, a president may inform Congress that he's going to be temporarily disabled. This happens when presidents go in for physicals. As you get older, there are certain procedures that you have to go through which might require general anesthesia. When you have general anesthesia, you're unconscious, so you're not really going to be an effective president. So you can temporarily transfer power to the vice president until you are brought back and coherent enough to resume your job as president. So this one happens more than you probably know. It's the second part that I think was the real safeguard. If the president is unable, think of Woodrow Wilson and a stroke, or unwilling, what happens if the president genuinely loses his mind? Like he's out there having a conversation with a tree and thinks the tree is talking back. And people say, Mr. President, are you okay? And he says, yeah, I'm fine. If the president is unable or unwilling to inform Congress, then the vice president and a majority of the cabinet secretaries inform Congress in writing that the president is disabled. And then a Congress can then tell the vice president to become acting president. I want you to understand something. If this ever happens, it will be probably the saddest day for the people who make that call. Remember, if you're the vice president, the president handpicked you to be his vice president. If you're on the cabinet, the president handpicked you to be on the cabinet. These are his people. And if they ever had to take action to remove him from office because he had lost his mind, it would be a very, very sad day. The way this works, if the president is fine, he just temporarily transferred power or anything along those lines, he can get his power back by letting Congress know that he's fine. If there is a dispute, if the president says, no, I'm okay, and then the vice president and the cabinet say, no, he's not, Congress has 21 days to decide who the president shall be. Basically, it's the same as impeachment. It takes two-thirds to remove him from office. My guess is if that ever happened, he would probably be removed from office because I cannot picture the vice president and the cabinet uh, trying to remove the president from office for anything other than he genuinely is unable to be the president. So hopefully that all makes sense and you are clear, and that brings this lecture to an end.